Next and final one-on-one discussion. This man has led this airline in neighboring Sri Lanka through some very turbulent times, but the country is on the up and the airline is very much looking to the future for growth. I'd like to please bring on stage Mr. Richard Nuttall, the CEO of SriLankan Airlines.
Hi, Jenny.
Thanks for coming up on stage. It's very cozy, these seats.
Yeah.
Feels like we're almost in a nightclub. Now, just for the audience, we just want to recap on some of the previous history for the airline, the fact that the government was looking to privatize the airline over a multi-year period. It has now decided it wants to keep the airline and keep control of the airline. That's surely a good sign of predictability and stability for the future and how you can plan to run the business.
Yes, I think so. I mean, if you look, we've moved on from where we were 2 or 3 years ago. So the previous government, the plan was, as you say, to privatize. We have a lot of legacy debt that needs to be cleaned up so that we can move forward. I mean, we're still paying maybe 7-8% of our revenues are going straight out in financing costs, and that's before you start working on overhauling engines that are getting more and more expensive. So we have to do that. But if you go back 2 or 3 years, the country basically had no money. It ran out of dollars. So the solution that the country was looking at was, I guess, one that had been done 15 years ago with Emirates, where Emirates came in and put in some money and helped with the management. But if you fast forward 3 years, you've gone from a country that is basically bankrupt, an airline that's struggled to make a profit for the previous 10 years. Tourism has fallen off the cliff because of what the country's going through. Whereas now you've got an airline that has been operationally profitable for 3 years. The country economy has stabilized and it's working through the IMF process. But you go to Sri Lanka now and everything is moving forward. And the various restrictions that were on there are gradually being lifted. Tourism is now booming. And so January we had 250,000 visitors, which was the second highest month ever in history and certainly the best ever January. And so what that means is that the opportunities for financing differently are there. And we now have a new government, and what is recognized is that tourism is incredibly important strategically. It's one of the top 2 or 3 biggest earners of foreign currency. It probably employs 10% of the population, or looks after 10% of the population in terms of the breadwinners supporting families. And therefore, the airline is a
plays such a crucial role, yeah.
Yeah. So I think the point is they're looking at different financing options, but given the state of the country, the state of the airline, the increase in business, the opportunities and the options are much greater than they were 3 years ago.
Do you feel you've got a better sense and clarity overall, given what has taken place, that you have more assurance and certainty?
So I think there's definitely, this business never has complete assurance. I mean, we all see this hockey stick going forward of growth, but there could be another COVID, or there could be, who knows what's going to happen to the global economy with what's going on at the moment. But if you look at where we are today, the country is in a much better place. Tourism really is growing very fast. So if you go back to when we came out of COVID, Sri Lanka was the highest growth Google tourism destination by millennials. And then everything stopped. Well, we've now gone back to that environment where tourism is coming back and it's a really hot destination. Every magazine you look at, it's there as top island or top destination or top for wellness or whatever it may be. And we are now seeing that energy and that traffic coming back. We're also next door to India, which is booming. I mean, you've just had the conversation. And so that all is moving in the right direction. Yields, while they have normalized to some degree after COVID, they're still buoyed by the fact that there is a lack of capacity in the market. And I don't think that's going to change very quickly. It will change a little bit, and some people think it's going to get tighter, some people think it's going to get easier, but it's still going to be constrained for 5 years. So I think that this is, it's a good time to be in this business, and it's an obvious time to try and get financing and move forward.
I was going to say, how many influencers email you directly for a free holiday?
Quite quite a lot.
Oh, dear. Now, where we look at the future, you're around 25 odd aircraft now.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was a bit of a shrinkage during the period of which there was some disruption. What do you want the goal to be for the longer term? How do you want Sri Lankan and in a position to be rebuilt?
So we have, we've got a business plan, and okay, executing it, there's quite a lot of variables in there, but what it basically says is we should be double this size within 5 years. Now, whether we'll get there, the questions over the financing. At the moment, we get aircraft by leasing aircraft as they come back on the market, which is very competitive space at the moment.
Expensive.
We also know that as you get to the end of that period, we really need to be looking at what's the fleet that's going to replace particularly the 330s. So I think, depending on where we get with financing, we may go back out to market and try and work out what the long-term fleet is and start morphing into that. Short-term, it's really going to be about leasing, and it's going to be about what's available. But, you've got to have that goal. If you don't know what you want to be, you're not going to move towards it. And so I think the view is we need to be about twice what we are today. And that doesn't do a lot more destinations. We've got a handful of destinations that are there, but a lot of it is just about frequency. If you look at the people that we are now competing with around the world, I think that capacity or flights into Sri Lanka has gone up something like 50% over the last 12 months. From Southeast Asia, it's doubled, and we're flat. So if you don't grow with the competition, then you gradually get marginalized. So we've got to grow. But if you look now, people don't just want to fly on a particular day of the week. They want to fly at a particular time on a particular day of the week. So I think our first challenge is frequency, and then we'll start to add new destinations.
And I think the idea is just remaining relevant, because if you don't grow, you'll just get marginalized. And do you get that sense that the government understands that now?
No. So I think so. And if you look, we talk about tourism numbers, but if you go back 2 years when the country had economic challenges, foreign carriers stopped flying. During COVID, foreign carriers stopped flying. And in those times, it's incredibly important, particularly if you're an island, that you have a national carrier. And even today, nearly 40% of the tourists that come to the island are carried by Sri Lankan. So, we play a very, very important role, and the government understands that. But obviously, you need to grow, because if that 40% becomes 20% because everybody's doubled and you've stayed the same or shrunk, then those conversations can start being difficult. And you start becoming less relevant. But then what happens if there's another crisis and foreign carriers stop flying? So we're really important for the country, but it's really important that we remain relevant and we grow with the market. Yes, you're correct.
To Ajay's point earlier about having an element of buyer's remorse about putting all his eggs in one basket as an airline, you're an all Airbus operator.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility for Boeing to have an in, for example? Do you look at the what ifs for the future? Because I guess, you don't have many choices. There are some new players on the market, but again, supply is still very much constrained.
So I think that's right. I mean, you've always got to look at all of the OEMs, if only to keep your incumbent honest. Clearly, if we're going to add odd aircraft and lease off the second-hand market, we're going to stick with what we've got, because you're not going to start investing in new training, new parts, all of those kind of things. You don't have the economies of scale. But I think, the challenge is once we can start to sort out the roadmap in terms of financing, then we need to look at, what's the fleet as we start getting towards the end of the decade. Our wide-body fleet is 330s. You're not going to be wanting to fly 330s when you get to the end of the 2030s. So what's the new aircraft? Is it the Neo? Is it the 350? Is it the 787? And so that's when you really start talking to both manufacturers, and the opportunity then is there for Boeing to say, well, if you can come in and transition the whole fleet with a really good deal, let's look at it.
I hope they're taking note. Do you dare to dream about the longer term? About you talk about existing, fulfilling growth for existing frequencies, but there's still a lot of untapped demand that you guys potentially have. The what ifs is how much bigger could you ultimately get?
So I think you talk to people that are in Sri Lanka that have been in the business there. I've worked for 8 airlines. It's an incredibly frustrating airline because the opportunity is massive. I think I've worked for 8 airlines, and there's been 1 or 2 airlines where you've just said this airline should make money. Some where you think, well, you'll make money in the good years and struggle in the bad years, and some where, okay, not so good. But Sri Lankan has a massive opportunity. If you look at its location, obviously you've got the demands of tourism, you've got a Sri Lankan diaspora. I know that Ajay wants to keep all his gateways and hubs in India, but we're still a very natural hub for India going east and south. But even if you look at the Indian Ocean, if you look at East Africa and the Indian Ocean, if you want to fly from Nairobi to Asia, if you're not going direct on Kenyan, if you fly and connect over Colombo, you've knocked 2 hours off going via the Gulf, which is what everybody does at the moment. So geography is really important in this business. So if you look at the natural growth of Sri Lanka, of tourism, of the diaspora, the massive growth of India next door, and you look at our geography and the traffic flows that we have the ability to feed that not many others can compete with, this airline could be in a really different place in a few years with the right investment. And
with the right investment, potentially a partner in the offing. Can you just give an insight into whether you, if they have the power to, look for a strategic partner, another airline who could be that support? Is that something that you're looking for?
So I think that the new government, what they have said is that tourism is really, really important, and therefore the airline is really, really important, but it's strategically important for Sri Lanka, and therefore the control should be within Sri Lanka. And therefore I think the view is that as far as possible that investment should be Sri Lankan. Now the debate is going on at the moment as to how that actually operates. Is it the airline? Is it subsidiaries? Is it government money? Is it public-private partnerships? Is it to go to the stock market? And decisions have not been made on that. But there are options, and because of the growth of tourism, because of the growth of foreign airlines, the multiples are much more favorable than they would have been 2 years ago. So there are more options on the table. But I think the plan at the moment is, as far as possible, to keep the ownership within Sri Lanka and the management within Sri Lanka.
Yeah, that's, so many exciting opportunities. Maybe Ajay, yourself, can partner up. Is that a possibility?
Who knows?
Ajay, if you're interested? There we go. I'll take a cut of any deal.
All right. Mm-hmm.
Now, how do you see the airline's role as well in terms of, what you can do in the long term, but in the short term, what stuff do you think the airline can do to help pull in more traffic, whether it be improving products on the service or on the ground? What can you do in the short term to boost that?
Well, I think the biggest role we play in some ways as a national carrier is that I think we are the biggest single promoter of tourism to Sri Lanka. And there's some very good DMCs within Sri Lanka, but if you don't travel to Sri Lanka, you might not know those names if you're on the other side of the world.
Jargon alert, DMC.
Sorry, yeah, all right. Destination Management Company, the inbound tour operators. What was I going to say? But if you look, we are the only organization, we've got a name that people recognize, and we've got a brand that's actually much bigger than the airline for historical reasons. We have people on the ground in all of the countries that we fly and many countries that we don't fly that are out there day in, day out promoting us to tour operators, looking at our digital footprint. We're also working very hard on we've got a holidays section, but we're working on a holidays website using AI. And in there, we plan to showcase all of the different things that you can do in Sri Lanka, work with different partners. And so I think that's the role that we play. And if you watch, Sri Lankan advertising, it's much more about the country than it is about the airline. If you look at our in-flight safety video, I think it's got more hits than any other airline's safety video. But it's all about views from the island. It's spectacular. So, what we really do is we promote Sri Lanka.
Yeah, I think when you look at the natural beauty, the products and offerings, and the wide variety around the island, there's so much.
I have never seen a bad video of Sri Lanka. It's so photogenic. But when you go there, that's what it is. It's spectacular.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Anybody who's not come, you should come and visit.
Are you offering discounted tickets? I'm sure they would definitely take that up.
Don't think we need discounts these days. It's booming.
Well, Richard, thank you very much indeed. Please do stay on stage. I do now want to bring up and return onto the stage Julia Simpson and Ajay Singh for our group panel discussion Julia, Ajay, if you'd like to come back on stage.